Death and State Funeral. For U.S. President George H.W. Bush, 41st President of the United States. George H.W. Bush, 1989 to 1993. January 20, 1989 to January 20, 1993. Part 6. Lauren Bush, Ashley Walker Bush, and Jenna Bush Hager were readers. Jan Naylor Cope provided the intercession. Tributes were made by John Meacham, Brian Mulroney, Alan K. Simpson, and George W. Bush. President Donald Trump attended, but the Bush family didn't ask him to speak, making this the first state funeral in which there was no tribute from the sitting president since that of Lyndon B. Johnson in 1973. First Lady Melania Trump, former Presidents Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush Bush's eldest son, and Barack Obama were also all in attendance, along with their respective wives, former First Ladies Rosalind Carter, Hillary Clinton, Laura Bush Bush's daughter-in-law, and Michelle Obama. Also attending were Vice President Mike Pence and Second Lady Karen Pence, former Vice Presidents Dan Quayle, Al Gore, Dick Cheney, and Joe Biden, future president, along with former Second Ladies Marilyn Quayle, Lynn Cheney, and Jill Biden, future First Lady. Presidential children in attendance included Linda Bird Johnson Robb with Chuck Robb, Lucy Baines Johnson with Ian Turpin, Tricia Nixon Cox with Edward F. Cox, Susan Ford, Chelsea Clinton, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush Bush's younger son, and Ivanka Trump with Jared Kushner. Then Senator Bill Nelson, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, political advisor to George W. Bush Karl Rove, former Homeland Security Secretary Tom Ridge, Democratic Representatives John Lewis from Georgia and Jim Cooper from Tennessee, Republican Representatives John Culberson from Texas, who represented Bush's Old House District, and Mark Meadows from North Carolina, along with many other lawmakers, attended as well. Former Secretaries of State such as Henry Kissinger, Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, and John Kerry, as well as Prince Charles, Chancellor of Germany Angela Merkel, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Peyton Manning also attended. Musical tributes were provided by the Armed Forces Chorus, the United States Marine Orchestra, United States Coast Guard Band, Michael W. Smith and Ronan Tynan, who sang at Bush's bedside before his death. The coffin was lifted, turned, and borne out of the cathedral to Ralph Vaughan Williams's 1906 Hymn for All the Saints, who from their labor rest signed nominee as 5 U.S. presidents stood in respect. After the service, the Washington Ringing Society rang a half-muffled quarter peal of Grandsire caters to Bush's memory. The hearse carrying Bush arrived at Joint Base Andrews at approximately 2:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and at 2:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time transferred aboard VC-25A-29000 via scissor truck as the Bush family boarded Special Air Mission 41 and took off after 2:26 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Bush's remains arrived at Ellington Field at December 5, 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, where they were greeted by a military escort, transported to St. Martin's Episcopal Church and laid in repose until the following morning. A second funeral service for family and friends was held at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time on December 6. Eulogies were delivered by President Bush's friend, former Secretary of State and White House Chief of Staff James Baker, and grandson George P. Bush. Clergy participating in the service included Church Rector Dr. Russell Levinson Jr., Bishop of Texas C. Andrew Doyle, and former Bishop of Texas Claude E. Payne. During the service, the Oak Ridge Boys sang Amazing Grace, and Reba McEntire sang the Lord's Prayer. After the church service, the remains were driven by hearse to the Union Pacific Railroad Westfield Auto Facility and transported by special railway funeral car to the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum for interment. The funeral train was led by Union Pacific 4141, an EMD South Dakota 70 Ace locomotive painted to honor Bush as the first time the remains of any U.S. president had ever traveled on a funeral train since Dwight Eisenhower in 1969. A guard of honor formed by the Ross Volunteers, the governor of Texas's military escort, attended the removal of the casket from the funeral train. As the casket was removed, the Fightin' Texas Aggie Band played Hail to the Chief, followed by the Aggie War Hymn. During interment, the United States Navy announced it would perform the largest funeral flyover in its history, with what the Navy described as an unprecedented F/A-18 Hornets led by Captain Kevin McLaughlin, the commanding officer of Strike Fighter Wing Atlantic, whose own aircraft was painted in a special memorial livery. The flyover was known as the Missing Man Flyover and featured 21 aircraft in a unique position as an honor to Bush's Navy pilot service during World War II. The interment ceremony was private. It was not filmed, broadcast on television, or streamed online at the advance request of the Bush family. Only the flyover, as well as the 21-gun salute and the performance of taps that happened at the library grounds, were shown instead. Bush's remains were buried on the early morning of December 6 between the graves of his wife Barbara and his daughter Robin. Throughout the day, all U.S. military posts equipped with artillery fired 21-gun salutes. Meanwhile, the salute to the Union, 50 successive rounds of artillery fire, was performed by batteries at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, Fort Stewart, Georgia, and Fort Drum, New York, at 5 p.m., a custom traditionally marking the final interment of a former president. As customary, pallbearers during each movement of the casket containing Bush's remains were drawn from personnel of the United States Army, United States Navy, United States Air Force, United States Marine Corps, and United States Coast Guard. In addition, honorary pallbearers were selected for most movements of the casket. Special agents of Bush's former United States Secret Service protective detail served as honorary pallbearers during the movement of the casket from the funeral home in Houston to the hearse that would transport it to Ellington Field. Sailors drawn from the crew of the United States aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush served as honorary pallbearers for the removal of the casket from Special Air Mission 41 at Joint Base Andrews. A further 13 honorary pallbearers were selected for the transport of the casket from the hearse to the rotunda of the U.S. Capitol, all of whom were former ship or strike group commanders of USS George H.W. Bush, including Admiral John Aquilino, Vice Admiral DeWolf Miller, Vice Admiral Frank Pandolf, Vice Admiral Nora Tyson, Rear Admiral Kenneth Whitesell, Rear Admiral David Thomas Jr., Rear Admiral Andrew Loisel, Rear Admiral Stephen Evans, Rear Admiral William Pennington, Rear Admiral Brian Luther, Rear Admiral Gregory Nozel, Captain Sean Bailey, and Captain Kevin O'Flaherty. Captain Sean R. Bailey, the ship's commanding officer at the time of Bush's death, was unable to serve as an honorary pallbearer as the vessel was making final preparations for deployment. I stop at this point today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. If you have any comments, I hope you contribute by writing, in order to develop the channel. Soon we will publish 35th President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, May 29, 1917 to November 22, 1963, also known as JFK, was the 35th President of the United States, serving from 1961 until his assassination in 1963. He was the youngest person elected president at 43 years. Kennedy served at the height of the Cold War, and the majority of his foreign policy concerned relations with the Soviet Union and Cuba. A Democrat, Kennedy represented Massachusetts in both houses of the United States Congress prior to his presidency. Thank you for watching.